Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Language Facilitation Q&A session. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive speech and language pathologist and language facilitation consultant, and I help parents teach their late-talking children how to use the words they need to share their wisdom with the world. And I do that in my Waves of Communication parent coaching programs and also via my platform, which is Facebook and YouTube. So if you are watching me for the first time, welcome to today's Q&A session. If you are joining me live, you are welcome to post your questions in the comments of this video. And while I'm waiting for some questions to come in, I have received some questions in my group, which is called Language Facilitation Resources for Parents. And if you're not a member of that group, you are encouraged to jump over to Facebook and look that group up and join it, because every day I post information in that group about late talking, diagnosis, strategies, different ways that parents can learn to become language facilitators and help their children learn to use natural spoken language themselves. So thank you for all the people who are joining me now. I see some more people joining in, and I'm going to go ahead and get started answering questions. The first question came in from Amina, who said, it was pretty basic, and she said, how to get baby focusing. So the primary strategy that I like to use to help kids start to focus is you need to change a little bit about what you're doing to catch their attention. You have to catch a child's attention and keep their attention to you talking. And that's really the basic foundation for language facilitation, because you can't facilitate natural spoken language with your late talking child if they're not listening and focused on the words that you are saying. Because with language facilitation, kids learn to speak from their parents by listening to their parents talk about the things they do every day together. So to get your child to pay attention to you in the first place, there are a few different ways, and it all depends on why in the moment your child isn't paying attention to you right now. How do you get your child to listen and focus? And the trick number one that I like to encourage is to do something a little bit different with your talking. Like I said, you want to make your talking a little more slow and careful. You might need to talk a little more to your child or talk a little less to your child, because if you are rarely talking, then your child's not hearing you talking and they're out of the habit of listening to you. And if you talk too much or without stopping in between talking, then your child can't get a word in edgewise, and they learn to just tune you out when they don't want to listen. And that also affects their long-term ability to go ahead and listen to you. So I'm just waiting for people to join in. If you go ahead and make a comment, somebody make a comment so that I see the comments start to pop in, because that sometimes takes a second for things to join, and I don't want to miss any questions. All right. So how to get a baby focusing, how to get a child focusing, change up your talking in some way to sound different than how you sound now, and to sort of call attention and keep attention on your talking by changing it up a little bit. That's a good way to get started. There are other things that cause children to stop paying attention to parents, and that could be things like over prompting. And if that is going on in your house, then the Swapping the Prompting Challenge on my YouTube channel is a good place to start. All right, moving on to the next question. Jennifer, who has a 6-year-old, has had we've had a little back and forth exchange over in the group with her question, and she has a 6-year-old who's using an AAC device, or Augmentative Alternative Communication Device, which is usually a tablet-based system with lots of pictures, and there might be different levels that you have to sort of navigate through to find a picture to touch and ask for things. And that's what her her son is doing, she mentioned that he's been using it for a little while now and that he uses it only for requesting. And while they're with their family, the question that she had is, how does she facilitate additional verbal language to go along with the alternative device, because her son does like using it and it is effective for their family when he has trouble understanding what he wants to learn or what he wants to say. So it's kind of a, when I talk about AAC devices for kids, I understand how helpful they can be for a child to use as a backup or a crutch, kind of, to help them get through to communicate their needs when even the child feels like their words don't work very well. And just like crutches are used for broken legs, they also are used for spoken language. However, when a person has a broken leg, they usually have therapy to help facilitate the muscles in the leg to start working and eventually can get rid of the crutch. With language facilitation, if you are using a device like that as a crutch or a way for your child to get their needs met while they're not, their verbal speech isn't coming along yet, and you're still trying to do some other verbal speech facilitation, but you're accepting the nonverbal communication that goes with that. So let's say your child is only using the device to touch a picture to ask for food or drink or things that they usually ask for that are listed on the computer, but like in Jennifer's case, their family doesn't use the device when they're playing. So their child probably does a lot of nonverbal language with his body to communicate in those instances. Demonstration, signs or pointing or facial expressions or things like that. And when kids are in the habit of using crutches like an augmentative device or nonverbal talking to get their communication going, and they believe that because, I don't know, for whatever reason, they think or have been told or somebody has encouraged them to use these devices instead of talking, and they're easier, the kids will remain stuck in them. So if your boy is 6 and you are interested in facilitating verbal speech, my number one recommendation is for you to start to phase out the use of the augmentative device for requesting at home. If he absolutely has to have it to function at school or therapy or wherever they're having, and at home you are already finding, she writes, that it's inconvenient to use, but their son goes to use it, what I recommend is that whenever your son does try to use the augmentative device to communicate, you always facilitate spoken language on top of that. The language of the requesting is never enough. If they touch a thing and it says apple juice, or they touch a thing and it says, I want apple juice, the parent must also acknowledge that as a potential verbal speech. Oh, you want apple juice. Okay, I will get you some apple juice. And then you get the apple juice and you say, here is your apple juice. Hold out your hand and then you give the child the apple juice. So you must facilitate. You can't just let the system go as the crutch. You have to encourage your child to do at least something else. If nothing else, then hold out their hand to request that object from you. It cannot be just touch a picture and the thing arrives. It can also, in your nonverbal play, like when you're doing other things, maybe you're playing puzzles or the other things that you're doing and you're facilitating spoken language for those things, then you also need to demonstrate the verbal language before you can expect your child to try to be able to say it. So you need to say the things that your child is requesting with the tablet, and then inevitably your child is initiating communication when they don't have the tablet in front of them. So what you do is you initiate, you explain the language that your child is initiating non-verbally. If they point at something, it's the same as pointing at the picture, right? And just the talkie box talked. But if they're pointing at an object trying to get you to understand that that's what they want, you use the same language facilitation language as you used when they use the talk box. And that's how you convert them to understanding, oh, this is how language works for requesting, for talking. Because we don't learn to talk for different, we do, I guess I should say, we learn to talk for different reasons. And if talking is not the way to communicate for requesting, but it is the way to communicate when you communicate about your feelings, then you're going to have a dichotomy there. It's going to be a divergent. Your child's like, well, when do I use words? And what should I use language for? And if I want to request something, should I be, and the tablet is, what inevitably happens is the tablet becomes less effective because it's not nearly as broad or flexible or expandable or convenient as learning the spoken language. So if your child is using an alternative communication device, the most important thing you need to do is to get them to start to focus on their mouth as the expressive machine, not the machine that is the computer and not the machine that is their body. And this actually moves into the next question from Dursey, who says, can teaching sign language to a nonverbal 3-year-old jeopardize their learning verbal speech? And the answer to that question is yes, in the same way that the augmentative device is allowing the child to use it as a crutch, where they don't want to try verbal speech because they don't have a reason to. If you give a child an easier language to use than verbal speech, and without encouraging talking, making sounds and speech tries with their mouth all the time. You can't ever give up that part. You can't ever give up reminding your child that their mouth is for talking, that their body and the devices and the things like that, those things are helpers, but you should never ever use those devices to build your child's vocabulary. Don't teach your child a bunch of signs and then want them to learn all of those signs in words, in verbal speech. It's the long way and memorization way and repetition way to learn talking one word at a time. Devices learn one word at a time. Sign language learns one word at a time, unless it is taught in functional, like to learn sign language as a deaf person would in sentence length, whatever. But to teach a child one sign, more, want, eat, cookie, drink, all of that stuff is the same as teaching them how to use a picture system. It is a crutch that they will use as long as it is functional. And I believe for late talking children that if you as a parent intend for your child to be using verbal speech at some point in their life, then you shouldn't use these other systems to move them into it. You should facilitate spoken language from the get-go, because teaching alternative systems is an alternative system. So I am going to type this. I'm just checking to see if some... There, Amina's there. Great, glad to watch. Okay, so she's there. And Bhupinder and Dawn, some other people joining. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you do have a question, I don't see any new questions rolling in yet, but there is time. Go ahead and post your question now in the comments, and I will get to it. So we talked about how to get kids focusing. We talked about augmentative and alternative communication, and we talked about sign language and how those things are alternative to spoken language. Language facilitation is about facilitating spoken language from where you are right now. If your child's nonverbal, if your child's limited verbal, if your child's saying lots of words, but they are not actually appropriate, or like their echolalic speech or something that's not appropriate for the situation, all of those situations, language facilitation is appropriate for. And if you haven't ever heard about language facilitation, or what I call language facilitation, but it really is just parents teaching kids to talk in a systematic way. And what I tell every parent is that in order for language facilitation to work, and it doesn't matter what's going on with your child, how old your child is, or whatever is the root cause of their late talking, language facilitation will work as long as parents have eliminated any blockages towards the child trying to learn spoken language from their parents. Because if a child wants to try to learn spoken language and parents facilitate it with the right words, the right way, at the right time, then children will and are all over the world learning to speak spontaneous, non-prompted, conversational language. And parents are teaching them to do it. They're just using my guidelines. I don't see the kids at all. So it is definitely possible. But the thing is, there's so many things that can block the process. Every family is different. Every situation is different. But unless you figure out what is blocking the process of your child learning spoken language from you, blockage is a blockage. The process will stop. And things like teaching other systems than spoken language stop or delay the process. In my professional experience, I've been teaching kids to talk for 30 years. And every time a different system gets thrown into the works, it delays spoken language development. I myself taught my daughter, my oldest daughter, to use sign language when she first started talking. And at 9 months, she knew like 50 signs, but she only said about 2 words. And I taught her sign language, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And at the time, my mother-in-law, which she still is hearing impaired. And so it was going to be handy. I knew sign language. I was proficient in sign language, and I taught my daughter. But my second daughter, who came out, 2.5 years later, I didn't teach her sign language, and she started talking at 9 months. So the thing is, my other daughter is now verbose. In fact, she's a speech therapist, but she also knows that teaching kids sign language delays their spoken language development, because the effort of both the speech therapist and the child and the parents is on getting kids to move their hands to do things instead of actually using their mouth, moving their mouth to make words to come out. And if you want to facilitate spoken language, that is required. Your mouth is involved. So that's how it goes. All right. The next question that I have is from Emily, who has a 3-year-old, and she said that her son is labeling, but no words to facilitate anger or frustration. And this is a stage that happens a lot when children are still relying on prompting from parents to say words. So if you've stopped prompting and you're just modeling language, and your child has moved into what I call the needs-based language, where they're saying a word to get what they want, or saying a word to make you do something or stop something, that's the needs-based. I say words to get other people to give me stuff, do stuff, or stop any of the other things. Because that's what, from very first communication that humans use, is that crying, right? And that crying is designed to make people give them something, do something to help them, or make them stop doing something to them. And so the first words also represent the same meanings. It's just about my needs and my situation. However, life gets in the way, and sometimes kids who used only needs-based language, their feelings and ideas, and especially big feelings, come out via behavior, because all they know is the words to label objects and actions and people, and they don't have words to make things, to communicate when they're not understood, or someone, puts them down, or they feel slighted. It doesn't matter if it was intentional by someone else, it was felt by the child. So if the child's maybe using nonverbal communication and the parent doesn't understand, or they're trying to use words and maybe they said the wrong word, they meant something different than what they said because their language is still developing, if that happens and parents don't understand them, that causes kids to get frustrated. So when they're not understood, they'll get frustrated and the behaviors come out all the time. Whenever emotions are elevated, kids will always slip back into the nonverbal communication because that's when that's how they know how they're feeling. So the idea is, remember, we use language for lots of different reasons, not just requesting, but also communicating our feelings, our ideas, and our opinions. So kids who are getting upset, like if they're getting upset in the store because they can't have something and you're trying to do that, and instead of facilitating language, you try to hurry through or just problem solve and throw them in the cart and get them out of there, then you've missed your opportunity to talk about the language for the frustration behavior. So whatever is causing your child to be frustrated, you have to talk about that. Don't talk about the behavior, the tantrum, the screaming, the hitting, the whatever they're doing, because it's just their communication. And when you respond to their communication, those behaviors stop. But you have to first, before you respond to the situation, you have to acknowledge that they are feeling in a certain way. When they're happy, you are feeling happy now. You look happy because you licked that ice cream. But if they are sad because they can't have the item they wanted at the store or whatever, and you say, no, we can't take that home today, it's not something we're going to buy, or whatever you've used to communicate, and your kid got the idea that, nope, I'm frustrated by this situation. The last time we came here, we bought something. This time you've changed the rules. They put it on you. They are the victim. They feel terrible. And 100% they are correct. This is how you win. This is how you teach your child to communicate your feelings. You acknowledge them. You tell them, you are correct. You are correct. Oh, wow. You are so frustrated. And I know last time we bought a toy, and we've bought a toy every other time, and mom's out of money and all this stuff is happening, but your kid doesn't care. They're just sad because they didn't get what they got when they wanted it. So what you do is you have to acknowledge the bummer. We can't always get what we want. Life is hard. Oh no. And if they are super drama, you get super drama. Oh no, we can't have this toy. I know, it's so sad because it is the coolest toy. And I know you love it, but we can't do it. And you have to let them know that you are just as sad and frustrated about the situation, not about your child laying on the floor, because that's what you might be communicating is, I'm very frustrated that my child's laying on the floor right now. And then you are being the victim. But the situation is your child is feeling victimized, whether you have intended that or not. That's what they're feeling. And so they're communicating that thing, and you have to respond in the same way that they fell and hit their head on the concrete and bleeding. Oh no, this is a terrible situation. How can I help you solve this situation? I can't buy a toy. Can I give you a hug? Can we calm it down? The store isn't always for buying, and it's a bummer. I want things too, but I can't have them. All of that is what your child needs to hear from you when they are upset. And when you use words to talk about how they're feeling and show them that wow, you feel bad about that. That is not nice. When someone does something that's not nice to your child, say, wow, that was not nice. Because that is frustrating. And you can empathize with somebody when somebody else does something not nice. And so if the situation is out of your control, then blame it on the universe, the rules. It's not time to have a fourth cookie. It's time to have dinner. That's just the rules of our house, and that's what we live by. Whenever you're out, if your child is a runner, you have to let them know these are the rules for this situation, and you avoid the frustrating behaviors by teaching your child ahead. And then when they happen, because they will happen, you have to give your child empathy for feeling how they feel. Talk about those feelings right then and there. And they're not going to imitate you. They're not going to say it. Just say it in their ear while you hug them. And if you have to do it 2 or 3 times, and you might, they learn over time that it is easier to communicate, I am angry. I am sad. We can't get a toy every time at the store. And they'll say those things aloud to remind themselves and calm themselves down in the future. And if they don't remember, you remember. And you do it the next time. And when you walk into the store this time, you say, this is going to be a good trip to the store. And we are going to get 2 things only, or 5 things only, or only the things on our list. We can't get any extras today. And you say that when you walk in. Even if your child's not paying attention, you have set it and established the rule. Because later when your child tries to throw 5 extra things into the cart and you can't do that, you have your ammunition to say, that's not what we're doing now. It's not time to take these things home. We have to do our thing. And if your child melts down in the store, you have to help them recover in the store. Doesn't matter what other people think. This is your opportunity to teach your child, and it is the only way you're going to be able to get back to the store again to, ride it out a lot easier. So that's what we've got. Let's see. All right. And I have one more question. I see there's a couple more coming in. Dercy says, thank you for answering my question about sign language. Your approach is different than all the other professionals I am working with now. And Dercy, I know that it's different. And I've had many parents tell me that over and over and over again, bringing in the sign language, this gives the child, in fact, someone even commented in the group, probably was another speech therapist, who said, it'll give your child a foundational language. And it won't. It will only waste time memorizing things. If you want verbal speech, you as parents must facilitate verbal speech. Speech therapists recommend sign language when they don't feel like they have the capability to teach kids to talk. And it's true. There are kids who will never talk for the therapist. I've had this experience myself. From kids, I'd show up at the house or the clinic or whatever, and the kid would shut down on me. And I would inevitably have to have the child doing something with their parent or coaching the parent about things that they could do after I left, because I wasn't getting any language out of the child. And if I had given up on trying to get this mom to facilitate verbal speech and get them all using sign language because I couldn't facilitate that talking myself as the skilled professional therapist, then that I would be disservice to that family, because their goal, the family goal, is verbal speech, not sign language. So that's the thing. That's the thing. All right, let's see. Poonam, how to reduce kids from self-talking or scripting. All right, I'm going to get to that one. I just want to see. Dawn says, speech therapist at school keeps trying to say AAC is a way to help communicate and keeps pushing it at us. This also happens, like I said, same as sign language, when therapists don't feel like they have the ability. And there are research studies, there are many research studies that show that children learn to say more words if they hear them. Okay, there are research that says that, and there are research that says, there are data that says that when children, again, memorize, if they hear a lot of words repeatedly, they will learn to receptively understand those words. They can identify many, many, many more words than they can express. And because they teach them how to identify and touch the picture, and no one is facilitating talking. No one is facilitating talking. And if they are telling you that they are actually working with a child's mouth to make it move like that, that doesn't do it either. Facilitating natural spoken language is unprompted, and it only comes from children listening to parents actually say those words in context of the situation that they say. And I know that it sounds very different than what they tell you, that what speech therapists are telling you. I was a speech therapist working in those fields. I went to the same school. I worked at all those same places. And I promise you, I tried for decades to get kids to say words and without ever seeing their parents. And they never made progress. They never made progress over time. Only the kids, when I quit doing that kind of repetitious and being responsible myself for the child talking, when I started giving up the responsibility to the parents to facilitate language, that's when all the progress of all of my clients took off. Of course, it only worked for parents who took on the responsibility. There were parents who didn't want to, who believed the speech therapist to say these things were helpful to get their kids talking. And then months and weeks and years go by and nothing's happening because at home they're not teaching it as well. So this is the situation that happens to many, especially stubborn, strong-willed late talkers who don't like the therapy for one reason or another. Maybe they don't like the therapist. Maybe it's at nap time. Maybe there's too many noisy kids in the room, for whatever reason. I always say if your child doesn't like therapy, they're not going to learn there. You can browbeat them and force them to be compliant, but they're not learning anything other than compliance. They're not learning to independently use skills that later they can be on their own. They are simply being trained to do things like say words to get things they want, just like the tablet system does. And the speech therapists who are teaching children to repeat words that they are saying, repetition memorize, is teaching kids language one word at a time. And that's why kids develop only needs-based language and not conversational language, because everybody's saying, do this, say this, do this, say this. They hear a lot of questions and directives. Do this thing, come here, give me your hand, point to the picture. And they're prompted through the whole life. So they become dependent on those prompts and wait for people to guide them through. Learn this augmentative system, learn this sign, learn this other thing, and it will help you communicate instead of tantrums or whatever. But then you still have to get out of that nonverbal system into verbal speech if you want spoken language. So you can go that route, but it is the long way. It is the long way. And that's kind of how it goes. All right, I see somebody else, Sharon. Oh my gosh, you opened my eyes on certain issues. Maria, thank you so much for that comment. And Kristen is sharing with someone else to watch. Super great. All right, so I have one more question really fast. We're only at 30 minutes, so we're good. I'm talking fast today, digging through these. If you have a question and you're watching me, post it in the comments right now. But I did get one more question in my group from Tanya, who has an 11-year-old late talker. Now, Tanya stopped prompting. She herself, she's not working in my program. I don't know if she's in my independent study course or not, because I don't keep track of those guys. But Tanya has an 11-year-old. She stopped prompting 8 weeks ago, and her child is now using independently spoken needs-based language on his own, that kind of stuff. However, she's noticing that he's only talking when she's talking. And what she's doing is, and she's dropped her prompting and she's using more demonstration language. So I'm guessing, Tanya, she's at that stage where she's talking about everything that her child is doing. So if he is brushing his teeth, she's saying, you are brushing your teeth. You're putting the toothpaste on. You're unscrewing the tube. You're doing that stuff. So she's narrating his life with demonstration language instead of prompting him to do this, take the cap off, put the thing on. She's using that other demonstration language. And what usually happens with kids, first of all, they love not being prompted anymore and just start to listen more, which is what happened with her boy. But then what happens is moms don't shift away from that narration talk, and the kids aren't able to get a word in edgewise because the parents are modeling, which you need to do at first. You will always talk more than your child, especially at the beginning with language facilitation, because your job is to give them the best verbal speech models you can. Clearly spoken, short sentences, true language, not baby talk, so they can hear it clearly used in context. That's how they pick it up. That's how they pick up. Spontaneous, receptive, and expressive language. Now, you can structure through receptive language. Which one is find your nose? Where's the number 2? All of that stuff. But the expressive stuff comes from listening to other people use those words functionally, and then the child figuring out how to do it themselves to communicate their own independent, in their own head ideas, not saying what you tell them to say. So my first advice for everybody is stop telling your child what to say. Now, Tanya's been trying to get her boy to say more words by using demonstration talking, and he's sort of talking in chorus with her, saying things at the same time, but without prompting. He's not spontaneously spitting out words on his own yet. So she's like, all right, well, now he's listening more. How do I get him to actually start saying the words? Which is, amazing, because we've only been 8 weeks and her boy is 11. So just so you know, 11-year-old child who was primarily nonverbal is now using needs-based language in 8 weeks. Bravo, Tanya. Now, how do we get him, to do it on his own without the prompt of the choral reading? She actually came up with the solution herself. You have to create pauses. You have to stop talking sometime. Once your child starts, and that's how you know it's time to shift. Once your child starts to use choral talking, they're talking at the same time as you do, or maybe they're requesting things non-verbally and you're saying, here is your juice, and then after they look at it in their hand, they say juice. They're starting to say words as you demonstrate them, and they're sort of popping out randomly on their own. That's when you know it's time to stop talking about what they are doing and start talking more about what you are doing. And not just what you're doing. This is the key right here. You have to shift into using not needs-based talking, but all of the other reasons we socially talk to each other. How do we share our ideas? Because we don't all walk around like teachers. Here is my nose. This is my hair. This is my belly. We don't walk around like that. We talk about things that we see in our world. Look at that cool outfit that lady has on. That's a big truck. Wow, that was a loud noise. The commenting about the things that you see and talking about them with some detail. That's where conversation comes from. Look at that dog. It's big. It's hairy. I like dogs. Those little stories, that's what gets your kiddo from needs-based to more feelings and all those things, because they hear you talk about your feelings. I like that dog, or, ooh, I didn't like that loud noise. Your opinions and your comments about it, those are the things that catch a child's attention, and that's what helps them string together their words. But the other thing, like I said, is you have to give them a chance to get a word in edgewise. If you've been structuring out, doing some demonstration talk now for 8 weeks, your boy has definitely learned a lot of phrases that you have said over and over again. Those phrases are in there, just like all the nouns and verbs and individual vocabulary that are in their little file cabinet. The file cabinets are full. Now we need to focus on using it. So the file cabinets are full because words are spilling out, and your job is to structure it into nice sentences by modeling your opinions about what you're talking about and giving spaces. Look at that dog. And allow your child to throw in his comment before you offer yours. Because I'll tell you what, they probably have an opinion, especially if he's starting to spit out words and talk on his own. So that is how, Tanya, you are going to take your next step. So Darcy says, I like your approach. Makes sense. I'm in your independent study, but my kids are still getting therapies outside with different approaches. So I don't know what to do next. Darcy, I recommend that, if you are working with people, if you're working with your child and you're also working with other people, and those other people don't do things that agree with what you are doing and what you're doing is seeing success, you have 2 options. You can share with those other people what you are doing. We are trying this with our child. Will you be willing to incorporate these strategies into your approach? and see what they say. It's never a good idea to tell a therapist how to work with your child, but if you share with them what is working for you, they will be definitely more open to integrating those things. Now, if the therapist keeps pushing you to do something, like somebody said earlier, the therapists keep trying to push these augmentative devices on them, then it's time to think about a different therapist. And if you want to know how to coach your child through these things, you can sign up to work with me and I will explain to you exactly how to do it. That's what I do for parents in my custom consulting programs. In my starter program, I give you a whole plan. I do a video analysis and identify what are the blockages to your child's talking. You also get a it's probably 10 or more pages now, the language facilitation plan with all the strategies written out, and then you get 4 hours of coaching time with me to teach you about your plan, and then you also get access to my independent study course so that you can learn more strategies on your own. Those who want to get hand-holding the whole way, work with me in my lifetime program, and then in addition to all of that other training, you get to work with me twice a week, face-to-face in a community meeting, and talk about your progress and get new strategies like this, kind of like we're doing on this Q&A, only more specific to your house. Obviously, I understand you more if I know your family. So, yeah. All right. So somebody else had asked, Maria said, my son has what is called jargon talk. My 3-year-old does talk words and at the time full sentences, but most of the time he goes into his other language. What advice do you have? And then somebody else was also talking about how to reduce kids from self-talking or scripting something they have read or heard before. So both of those kinds of situations happen sort of for the same reason. The jargon talk in your 3-year-old, so your 3-year-old does say words, probably the same with other kids who do that self-talk. So here's the thing about jargon talk and self-talk and any talk that doesn't sound like words. The best thing to do with those things is do not stop them. Don't stop those things from happening. Any attempt your child is trying to use their mouth to communicate, whether it sounds like words or not, you want to encourage. Because remember, they're moving from whole body, facial expressions, pointing, gestures, tantrums, behaviors, into using their mouth and verbal speech to talk. The process is never very smooth, especially for late talkers, and it all depends on why they were late talking. So, and it all depends too on what kind of language your child has exposure to. So here's two solutions for both of you. The first thing is don't limit the self-talk. Don't stop it. If it is inappropriate, too loud, intrusive, or something like that with other people, then you have to coach your child about adjusting their talking for that situation and why. This is a store. There are other people here. This is not a place. And you don't say what you don't do. You say what you do do. This is a place for quiet. This is a place for quiet mouths. This is a place for whatever. If your child has a lot of very active moving behaviors, stimming behaviors, flapping, twirling their hair, chewing on stuff, whatever, do not limit these behaviors unless they are either like hurting somebody else, like socially inappropriate. They can't be screaming in the store if they love to scream. They have to learn that there are times to scream and this is not them. For an older child, you can show them that the times that it's not appropriate to do. One of my friends, Angela, with her 14-year-old now, she used wristbands, those plastic ones, or even a string or something like that she tied around her child's wrist. And she said, when we're wearing this, we have to use a quiet voice. And she would put this wristband on him every time they went somewhere that she needed him to be quiet. But she also made made sure that she offered him the time when she heard him doing those things spontaneously at home, wherever they were, that it wasn't bothering anybody else. It probably was annoying to her, at some point, if they can get pretty annoying. And if it is annoying, then you have to let your child know that they either have to go to another room to do that, or you have to help them find something else that allows them that opportunity. And like I said, if it's their mouth that they're using, you don't want to dissuade that. So for kids who are doing self-talking, if you can identify the meaning behind it, even if the meaning is, I'm anxious right now, and your child is saying, Old MacDonald had a farm, but they're feeling anxious. They're doing this because you look at them and you see that they feel anxious. You need to talk to your child about the anxiety, about the reason for the communication. That's how language facilitation works. And it's the same for a 3-year-old who does talk words and add sometimes full sentences, but most of the time he goes into his other language. And that happens again if a child is saying words and full sentences. First of all, are they prompted? And if they're not prompted, if your child is saying words on their own, but they're hard to understand, then what they're hearing is probably too fast. So your child's good for the needs-based learning. So however they learned the vocabulary for the nouns and verbs for the things that he's using to say words on his own, probably requesting things. But when he's doing pretend play or thinking about stuff he's heard or seen in his head, it comes out, you're a ball, you're a car, and it sounds like words, but it's not words. That's because the stimulus that they first heard was too fast for their little brain to catch every word. And they're trying to do their best with their mouth to make the same thing that they heard. And that's what's happening when they are using that jargon talk. So Maria, my suggestion for you is, if you hear your child trying to use words, continue to facilitate language without prompting, by modeling things. And if his speech is sounding kind of garbled, think about how fast you are talking. If you are a super fast talker, Maria, then dial back your rate and see if that doesn't help your child improve his articulation, because that's what helps a lot. That's the number one strategy that helps most families. All right, let's see. I don't see any more questions coming in. Somebody said just downloaded my book. Hey, Naren, thank you so much. That's wonderful. I hope that you all have enjoyed this Q&A session. It has been fun for me. I like to get these questions ahead so that I can get in and answer for folks. Sometimes having these discussions about, what your therapist is recommending, if it doesn't sit right with you and you kind of want to run it by a different opinion, that's a good thing to do. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you so much for sticking it out through all of this. And if you have a question, you are welcome to post it in the comments or send me a message, and I'll start collecting them for next Thursday. I usually put a post up the day of or the day before looking for questions in my group from families. And if you are you interested in working with me to get all the strategies you need to help your child, you are welcome to investigate my Waves of Communication program. You can head over to my website, wavesofcommunication.com. By the way, there is a free class. The website's not here. Hello, wavesofcommunication.com. Right? So there's that. There's that way to do it. And then I also have a book on Amazon. It's called If It Isn't Fun, It Isn't Fun. Teach your child to talk faster than speech therapy. If you are interested in getting access to this book, you can head over to Amazon. It's all over the world on Amazon Kindle and paperback. And this week I just recorded the audiobook. So hopefully the audiobook, which is actually way better than both the print because it's got me behind it, is going to be amazing. And you'll want to be on the lookout for that. So thanks again, everybody, for joining me today. I appreciate all your likes and shares. If this video was helpful for you and I answered a question for you, please consider sharing it on your timeline so that other parents can see that Thursday live Q&A with Marcy is available for other parents. And if you have started, if you're in my independent study course or you've worked with me before, remember, this is a great time to get some ongoing coaching. Jennifer and I know that a few of these folks, Dercy, they're in my programs and they haven't made the investment to work with me, but this is a way to get some coaching. So I really appreciate everybody's support and mostly your effort, because I know that parents are the best language facilitators, and I know that these kids are not learning to talk without you putting in the effort and working hard every day with your kids. And that's what it takes. That's what it takes to see real improvement. So thanks again for joining me, everybody. I'll see you next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Facebook for my live Q&A. And I'll see you all then on my next video. Bye for now.